Ever wondered about the future of Manx politics? What do our young people think about politics? We'll hear later that Junior Tynwald is of the opinion that transport and communication infrastructure of the Isle of Man does not meet the population's needs. And also, Junior Tynwald is of the opinion that school meals should be provided to more of the student population, including, if possible, to all primary students, in light of the cost of living crisis. But first, a couple more questions from the Junior Tynwald question paper.
We move on to question 13. I call on the Honourable Member for Douglas Central, Mr. Quilliam.
Thank you, Mr. President. What strategies are in place to improve the crime detection rate?
Call on the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs to reply.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you for the question to the Honourable Member. Whilst I am always keen to drive improved performance in the constabulary, I think it is important to consider this question in context. Although there are variations between the Isle of Man and England and Wales in terms of both legislation and available statistical outcomes to crime, it is generally accepted that the Isle of Man detection rate is already extremely high. Since 2020, the detection rate on the island has risen from 43% to 48%, whilst the trend of the number of crimes committed per annum is falling slightly. By comparison, whilst it is difficult to accurately summarise the detection rate in England and Wales, the Home Office reported in March 2022 that 5.6% of all crimes resulted in a charge and/or summons outcome. There are, having said that, a number of strategies to maintain or improve the detection rate, which fall into two main categories. The first, accurate and consistent recording of crime in line with what the public would expect of the constabulary, and secondly, dedicating resources to where they are most needed. The start of the financial year in 2023 saw the introduction of a renewed version of crime counting rules in the Isle of Man. Historically, the Isle of Man has looked to the UK Home Office counting rules and made adaptations where legislation wasn't available on the island or a theme didn't exist in the same way. The new counting rules are more suited to the Isle of Man and should also provide more meaningful data to the Manx public. There is also a team of staff in the Crime Management Unit of the Isle of Man Constabulary that ensure that crimes are recorded properly. The Constabulary believes that the Manx public would want to see that people who have committed a crime should face a suitable criminal justice process. The new recording rules aim to ensure that the police record the offence which would actually be prosecuted in any given scenario. They also include, as reported crime, some distinct Manx offences, such as provoking behaviour, which are not comprehended in the UK framework. This will improve the connection between crimes recorded and court outcomes. This will be brought under the spotlight in the next Chief Constable's annual report and is likely to affect the detection rate. However, the aim is to provide the Manx public with more relevant data rather than to affect the detection rate. The second area is also a consistent feature throughout the Chief Constable's strategy, utilising the right agency for the right task. Empowering decision makers to signpost calls for service to the most appropriate agency and only deploying police resources to where they are required. This will allow officers to spend more time on their core business of protecting vulnerable people, tackling criminality and reducing harm. This is also likely to assist in maintaining or improving the detection rate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Supplementary, Mr. Quilliam.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the development of artificial intelligence, what, if any, plans do the Department of Justice and Home Affairs have to implement this technology?
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President, and what an excellent question. I think in common with all of government and society, artificial intelligence is going to fundamentally start changing and informing how we approach policy making and indeed data collection and analysis. The one thing I would say as far as the constabulary is concerned is they already have quite a sophisticated approach to data capture and analysis. And if the Honourable Member hasn't had the opportunity, I would encourage him and all Honourable Members to read the latest Chief Constable's annual report, which is data rich. So we already are very well informed around criminality, harm and so on, which serves us well. I think in terms of actually how it will make a difference, how artificial intelligence might make a difference as to the process of understanding and recording crime. At the moment, there is a strong human element in that, because it is police experience and knowledge that considers what a witness or an individual reports, but also assesses the strength of viability, any evidence around that and so on. So it's a very interesting question as to when and whether artificial intelligence can become a meaningful way of processing and recording that sort of reporting in of criminality. But I don't necessarily see that changing in the short term, but I think he raises a very good point. Thank you, Mr. President.
Move on to question 14. I call on the Honourable Member for Ayr and Michael, Mr. Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask, is there a joined-up strategy for electric vehicle charging?
Call on the Chair of the Climate Change Board to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. At present, there is no official cross-government strategy that covers the installation of EV charging points. However, the approach being taken by Manx Utilities follows industry best practice and aims to stay ahead of demand. The principal installer here of public pay-as-you-go EV chargers is Manx Utilities. MU aims to maintain a ratio of 1 public charge point for each 10 electric vehicles based on industry best practice, and this is being achieved. As of 30th of June, 1,148 EVs were registered and 119 public chargers have been installed. MU select locations for charging points based on multiple factors, including geographical spread to create an all-island network to meet increasing customer demand and avoid range anxiety, site suitability to afford 24-hour availability for practical and convenient public access, including disabled access. Some local authorities also provide public EV charging points. Transport is the island's third largest source of emissions, and EVs will play an important role in decarbonising this sector. The Climate Change Plan 2022 to 2027 has the following actions. Transport strategy to deliver 15% sector reduction by 2027, to be underway by 2024, informed by the Strategic Transport Decarbonisation Review to be completed in 2023. And also to ensure that electric vehicle charging infrastructure is in place to meet increasing demand. Work on the transport decarbonisation scenarios is almost complete, and the Climate Change Transformation team will work closely with the Department of Infrastructure and Manx Utilities in relation to ensuring a strategic approach to EV charging alongside the wider transport decarbonisation strategy. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Honourable Members. That concludes our question time for this morning.
I think you had a supplementary.
Yes, Mr. Kane, would you like to ask a question? Supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is, well, even though this is a very good strategy and has a lot of benefits, one of the main issues with EVs fundamentally is that you aren't actually reducing the overall emissions, you're just outsourcing them, as lithium battery manufacturing is one of the most polluting industries. So my question is, how does the island intend to move away from lithium batteries and towards more investment in public transport?
Chair to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank the Honourable Member for that question. We are at the start of gathering the data and information following a company that's been commissioned to help us develop our transport decarbonisation scenarios, and that will inform the strategies that we put in place to move forward. And I appreciate the concerns over lithium in its collection and involvement in EVs, and also the EVs emissions in their manufacture. But all vehicles, all products have emissions in the manufacture, and we will follow best practice. Hydrogen technology, for instance, may come in the future, or fuel cells for replacement vehicles for fossil fuel ICE cars as standard. But the island is gearing up for what is available right now, and the transport decarbonisation strategy that will follow, gathering all the possible scenarios, is going to be critical in the journey that we take forward. And I completely agree with the Honourable Member that our public transport offering is going to be key in that. To reduce individual journeys is really helpful in reducing our emissions across the island, and we look forward to those coming forward in the autumn. Thank you, Mr. President.
Now, honourable members, we move on to item 2, transport and communications infrastructure. I call on the honourable member for Garth, Ms Reader, to move.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of Tynwald, it is clear to all of us that the island requires good communication and transport links in order for us to thrive, especially if we are to meet the goals as laid out in the Isle of Man, our island plan. This is key to creating a prosperous and sustainable future for our island. The Isle of Man is known for its financial, gaming, legal and offshore sectors as we redevelop our strength as a tourist destination. A well-connected Isle of Man would open us up for new opportunities to attract businesses, investors and tourists to the Isle of Man. Ultimately, a stronger economy will mean increased prosperity, a higher standard of living and will allow us to meet our island plan. However, it has become clear to me that we have a significant issue with transportation on the Isle of Man. The question is where we begin when we look at the transportation and the infrastructure on our beautiful island. I think that it's best to start off with our island plan, a key component of this place building a great communities at its heart. However, where are we? Waiting for a transport strategy that has been place marked for 2024, something that could end up being kicked into the long grass. The Isle of Man airport fiasco, a surreal and frustrating caper that simply does not fit into our plan to grow the island. The Minister has gone on record to tell the population that there is simply not enough air traffic staff to maintain the airport day to day. This indicates a significant failure in workforce planning by a government that claims to have a plan for our island. An airport that is not open is simply jaw-dropping and indicates that we are closed to businesses. Furthermore, flying to and from the Isle of Man has become a lottery, with only a 9 in 10 chance of being able to leave or return to the Isle of Man, with 10.1% of flights cancelled and an even greater number that do not leave on time. Without the ability to be able to get to the other islands that surround us, the island plan is bound to fail. The Isle of Man, for many people, will be seen as a gilded cage. If it were only the airport, we might be able to take a small measure of comfort. However, we can look at the physical infrastructure of the Isle of Man and see that we have an increase in the number of roads where the conditions have deteriorated. This is particularly concerning as we move towards our net zero goals. New electric cars, being heavier, will increase the load on roads, and we need to be more proactive in repairing and rebuilding our roads. Too many of our roads are in need of renewal. Patching and surface dressing are short-term solutions, and it is clear that a strategy to rebuild our roads is fundamental to building a great community on the Isle of Man. The Isle of Man's Our Island Plan's strategic outline lays out the aspiration for sustainable growth, improved quality of life and enhanced connectivity. It is my view that there has been a failure to demonstrate a commitment to realising these goals and objectives. There is growing feeling that we are in a period of managed decline, and it is my belief that the sustainability, security and vibrancy of this island requires vigorous improvement if we are to meet our island plan. Thank you.
Somebody to second? Mr Hooper.
On my way out anyway, Mr President. I'm happy to throw a hand grenade. I beg to second.
He didn't reserve for his remarks then.
Have anyone wished to comment on this debate?
Thank you.
Yes, if I may. Miss Parry, please.
Thank you, Mr President. I wish to second the motion. A good transport and communication infrastructure creates social cohesion, allowing everyone north to south to be able to fully engage in developing our nation. It is now clear that there is in fact a division between our communities, with some communities well served and integrated into the Isle of Man's public transport system and those who are not. It is also important, if we are to develop a sustainable island, that there is a requirement for this system to be a well-planned combination that integrates buses, a safe and secure cycle infrastructure, pedestrian-friendly routes. This would encourage people to use public transport, take bikes to work and school, encourage visitors all year round. This would promote healthier and more active lifestyles, reduce stress and mental health problems, and contribute to a cleaner and greener Isle of Man for future generations.
I'll give the mover an opportunity to reply before we vote. Mr. Cowley, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to begin today with saying that I agree with all points made by the honourable members and the honourable member for Garth, and I'd like to thank you for bringing this motion forward today. Firstly, can I turn my attention to transport? The well-publicised reduction in bus fares to a £2 fare outside of Douglas didn't do very much to stimulate the use of public transport. However, for the same cost, we could have made free bus travel for all under 25s on the island, which I believe would do three main things. It would support an age group that isn't economically well off. It would support families travelling with their children, and it would help reach some of our climate goals by reducing the use of personal transport in favour of public transport. Next up, I'd like to talk about the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company. Previously, the Steam Packet was owned by various banks and pension funds which had business models to maximise profit, which, for the time, was acceptable. However, as of 2018, the Isle of Man government has been the major and only shareholder of the Steam Packet. As a state-owned service, it is vital that the livelihoods of the Manx people is no longer acceptable for the ferry service to continue profiting off those who require travel off-island with their cars. Perhaps this should be reviewed and there should be a reduced residence fare to allow people to travel affordably. Thirdly, I'd like to talk about driving lessons. Schools have taken the decision to restrict pupils leaving school to take driving lessons during school time, even if it falls during a private study session. However, many employers on island and off require a full driver's license as a requirement for employment. It is my view that schools should change their policies to see this as an essential enrichment activity and an employability skill, and so I believe schools should allow students to take time off, as due to the shortage of driving instructors, which means that students must be flexible to fit in the lessons. Secondly, I'd like to turn my attention to connectivity. Whilst there may be fibre connection running near to a house, if you simply cannot afford this, you are no more connected than anyone else. The Manx government currently judges connectivity by how close fibre is to a house, when it should really be how many houses in an area can afford it. During COVID, Isle of Man schools handed out laptops to students to allow for students to continue their studies and themselves paid for the internet connections of those households to ensure their connectivity. I'd like to further propose that the government consider free or heavily discounted broadband to any household with members in full-time education. Thank you very much.
Go on, Ms. Pirrie.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to agree with Mr. Cowley about what he said with the Steam Packet Company. As someone with a personal link to a person who works there, I can just say, especially with the economic side of it, it's completely just inaccessible for the Manx people. Over the TT period, a single person and bike going on the Mimicry was £700 plus. For a staff leisure ticket, it's £5. I could go onto the boat with £5 and go to Liverpool. It's just, and the Manxman, it fits over 800 people. Only about 200 or 300 of those seats are free to access. The cabin fares have gone up. There's all these lounges, but you have to pay for them. And with the cost of living crisis, it's going to be increasingly difficult for people to get off the island, residents, people coming here for the TT to improve the economics of the island. So I'd like to ask, are there any plans on the Manxman to make it more economically sustainable?
Call on Mr. Gelling.
Thank you, Mr. President. In relation to transport, I would like to raise a point about road haulage equivalency for freight on the Isle of Man. I would like to know whether it is just for freight leaving the Isle of Man or is it for freight coming from the UK or Ireland to the Isle of Man? And if anyone's unsure what road haulage equivalency is where a transport freight is charged by the same cost as it would be on land, plus a small extra charge to make this is to make freight more affordable to ship across the Irish Sea, and it will make it easier for many local businesses to be more competitive, and in particular Manx farming to be more competitive and able to send its crops to the UK mainland, as the Ramsey Bakery, which has been a major customer for many arable farmers, has now closed down. The road haulage equivalency would allow them to ship their crop to the UK mainland in an economically viable way. Thank you.
Call on the mover to reply before we vote. Would you have an opportunity to reply?
No.
Your prerogative. Right, honourable members, we come to vote on this item, item 2, as laid out on the order paper. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. The ayes have it. The
Aye.
Division called, so you now have to vote on your buttons. Just wait. Clerk will have it up on the screen ready. Now you can vote.
Now then, subject to the interference of the Deputy Speaker in the far corner, in the House of Keys it's 20 votes for and 1 against.
Legislative Council, 6 for, 1 against, therefore motion carried.
After the break, we'll hear the free school meals debate. You're listening to the July sitting of Junior Tynwald.
So we now move on to item 3, free school meals, and I call on the Honourable Member for Garth, Miss Reader again.
Thank you, Mr. President. Junior Tynwald, it is my belief that the Isle of Man should look to provide free school meals for all students in our school. Good nutrition plays a vital role in a child's development. Science shows us that a healthy diet promotes concentration, memory, and overall academic performance. Free school meals also eliminate disadvantages that many children face due to inadequate nutrition. It will be argued that the upfront cost is prohibitive. However, this short-term thinking fails to make a clear cost-benefit analysis in the long term. Improved cognition, better health outcomes, lower levels of obesity will mean that we have a better educated workforce who will make better decisions on lifestyle, and it will clearly lead to a more healthy population who will reduce pressures on the National Health Service. At the present time, when children have access to a healthy school meal, it eases the financial strain on families, freeing up resources that can be used for other essential needs. Parents will be more able to contribute towards other education-related expenses, extracurricular activities, and even basic necessities, leading to an overall improvement in the quality of life for entire families. If we make the move to introduce free school meals, it will not be us simply providing a meal. It will be an investment in our children's well-being, education, and future success. Providing every child a nutritious meal will not only level the playing field, but will be able to foster a sense of community with all of us in it together, and it will create a brighter future for our island. Thank you.
We have a seconder. Miss Parry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to second the motion. Our island plan has at its heart strategies that unite and develop cohesion within our communities, rather than allow the opportunities for division to build within our community. The provision of school meals to all young people will give them the greatest of opportunities to develop. A key word of the plan is the word secure. This will allow us to build an education system that supports everyone. It also has the word vibrant at its heart, and free school meals will mean that we provide excellent educational opportunities for all. Healthy diets lead to better cognition and academic performance, meaning that young people will better understand how to look after and nurture our island. Therefore, I believe that the provision of school meals is something that the government should put into place for our children. Thank you.
Miss Parry, did you wish to speak? Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I was doing research about the number of children that are already entitled to free school meals. This is through the Employed Persons Allowance, Job Seekers Allowance and Income Support. I found that while numbers of children in school have grown since before the cost of living crisis in 2018, the numbers of children actually on free school meals has decreased. So I'm just wondering, is there actually need for this? Because the demand hasn't increased, so why should the supply increase?
Honourable Member, Mrs Kane.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for bringing this subject to us this morning. And if I could perhaps suggest or request the Education Minister makes a contribution. It is essential that young people have access to nutritional good meals once a day. The principle of why school meals were introduced in the first place was to ensure that every student, every young person on the island could have a wholesome, nutritious meal and a drink. And the situation we have at the moment, and honourable members here today would have greater insight, is perhaps the school meals are not always the most nutritious, that there are levels of ultra-processed food, perhaps more than we would like to see. And also, is the cost of school meals unaffordable for some, but actually, is the content and the quality of the food that is available being reduced? Because the cost, as I understand it, of a school meal is below what most people would pay for a cup of coffee or a drink in one of the many establishments around the island. So should we have a rethink? Would the Department for Education, Sport and Culture think that a review is necessary into our school meals? And would it be less costly to make the school meals free to all those in education at both primary and secondary, even if that was a particular meal allowing for some special dietary needs? And also, my experience is that any student with who is vegetarian or vegan, especially at primary level, has very, very limited choice of just a baked potato practically every day. So I think this is an excellent motion for the Honourable Member to bring. And I would completely endorse school meals should be provided to more of the student population for no cost, no charge to the students. And I don't want to see that money come out of the education budget. I think that the Isle of Man needs a rethink in what is available. And the final point that I would like to see is that school meals contain more Manx produce, so that more of our local Manx produce finds its way into the school system. And once again, that schools could produce the meals that they serve rather than reheating what is provided. And there is a huge need, I would say, for improvements in this area. Thank you, Mr. President.
On the Honourable Member, Dr Hayward.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did some background looking into this, and there is data that's been provided in written questions by the Department of Education. It turns out that there are just over 19% of our primary school children already receiving free school meals. However, that drops to 14% in secondary schools. And I think this is somewhat associated with stigma, because it doesn't seem to me that the need for free school meals would be less necessary in secondary schools. I think my other concern then is that we perhaps don't have clear visibility on the children for whom this is an essential part of their nutrition in a day, and that we may be missing some of those children. In some primary schools, the situation is really unbalanced. Over half the children in certain schools have free school meals, whereas it's less than 10% in others. So I think this really is an issue related to poverty and to food poverty. It's particularly concerning because we've seen the rate of inflation in food prices recently, that we will be pushing those families further into food poverty and unable to feed their children properly. And I also wonder about whether it is possible to consider that this is not just a school time problem. This is a problem that persists during holiday as well. We have seen measures in the past. During COVID, we saw vouchers issued, and in an initial response to the cost of living crisis, we did make some moves around that. But we seem to have lost sight of that problem and be quite content to ignore the fact that with 7 weeks coming up where those children won't be in school now, for those receiving free school meals, they may not be getting a nutritious meal during the day. Thank you.
Call on the Honourable Minister for Education, Sport and Culture.
Thank you, Mr President. I did intend to join in the debate, but thank you, Mrs Kane, for inviting me to. And obviously, ensuring that our students have a nutritious meal at lunchtime is a key objective within our schools. The health of our pupils is of paramount importance, and the department regularly reviews its primary school meal options in order to ensure that we are fulfilling daily nutritional requirements. The primary school catering team consults with public health, a dietitian and an officer from the department before implementing any menu changes within the primary setting. However, ultimately, all changes are decided and implemented by the department, and that's done through a departmental meeting. I have launched a full review into school meals following questioning in the other Honourable Court in the House of Keys. That is ongoing, and that will be a full school meals review and rebranding. And this is being taken up by one of my honourable colleagues, Mrs. Christian, so that is ongoing. With regards to the prices of meals, it is a strict criteria that free school meals are made available, and they're linked to income-related benefits from the Treasury. So that's income-based job seekers allowance, employed persons allowance, or income support. Therefore, any reasonable adjustment to the free school meals is based on this eligibility to benefits, and we use this criteria as for the justification for the allowance for free school meals. The free school meals allowance was implemented and is calculated to enable the children or students to obtain a 2-course midday meal, excluding drinks, as water is available in all of our schools. A range of drinks are available to purchase, if desired, within cash cafeterias, and that's in the secondary schools and at University College of Man setting. With regards to Honourable Member for Russian's comments with regard to the percentage within primary and secondary and whether it was possibly a stigma, I can report that all of our schools have a card system for free school meals, so no student's identifiable as being on a free school meal, and that was brought in, I think it was back in 2012. I was actually a member of the leadership team at Ballacamine High School that implemented that, and that was the first school to implement it, and it's now throughout all of our school systems. But that was to remove any stigma around free school meals. So no student should be identifiable because it's an allowance on a card, the same as any other student that puts funding on that. But most important for me as the Minister is to make sure we've got the right environment, the right quality of food for our students available at lunchtime that helps support the biggest effect for the student with their education. And there's been lots of comments today with regards to being able to concentrate and making sure that we have everything available to our students and the infrastructure there. Many members may not know that school meals previously was cooked on most premises, and we did have kitchens available in all of our schools. Previous governments chose to take the kitchens out of some of our schools, and it would be great expense to put that back. So the key of doing this full review of school meals is to make sure we can deliver good, wholesome, healthy meals that are aligned to the Food Standards Agency. And also there's further questions in Tynwald this week with regards to this, but we have launched that review. I think it was back in March, and that is ongoing, and we will make sure that that's well publicised. And I'm happy for anybody here today or anybody that would like to discuss school meals with me to get in touch. Thank you, Mr. President.
Well, the Honourable Member, Mrs. Corlett.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to play devil's advocate here and ask honourable members today whether they think targeted intervention would be better than blanket provision. Providing free school meals for all would come at a considerable continuing cost. So I just ask members, is that the best use of very limited resources we have at the moment, or should it be targeted to those who need it most? Thank you, Mr. President.
Honourable Member, Mrs. Kinnish.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mine's just a small point, just building on the data provided by the Honourable Member for Russian around stigma between and the percentages of primary schools, 19% versus the percentages for secondary schools at 14%. I note the point made by the Minister about lunch cards, which destigmatised access to free school meals. And I wonder whether there's a change or a difference in that data, because some schools have policies which allow certain student year groups off-site during lunch hours, therefore the demand demand may not be the same for those individuals. Thank you, Mr. President.
Calling the Honourable Member, Mr. Clark.
Mr. President, whilst I agree with the fundamental point of the motion, I disagree with the wording. The motion states that free school meals should be provided to more students, including, if possible, primary school students. However, I believe that all students, including all primary school students, have the right to free school food, as this would make schools much more equal and remove any existing stigma surrounding those on free meals.
Call on the Honourable Member, Ms. Heard.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would instead like to politely disagree with the Minister of Education that, in fact, lunch cards do not prevent stigmatisation. Personally, at St Newton's High School, if a student wishes to purchase an item at break time, they then cannot afford to purchase a full meal as of lunchtime. So that means they would only, say, have a croissant at break and then a sandwich at lunch. And I see this as a major barrier to people accepting free school meals. Thank you.
Call on Mr. Cowley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to pick up on a comment that the Education Minister made before when she stated that water isn't always available in schools. Can I just ask, when will this be addressed?
This is really for the mover to actually reply at the end of the debate, and we'll be voting. You're not asking a question of the Minister. This is a motion. Does anyone else wish to contribute? The mover has a right and opportunity to reply. Do you wish to respond, Ms. Reader?
Yes, please. I would just like to say in regards to the point that was made about not having a blanket programme for everyone, I think that because of the stigma that is in that there is about people having free school meals, I think it would possibly be difficult for families in that situation to come forward and request personal help that just applies to them and families similar. So I think a blanket, an opportunity for everyone to have the same would help with reducing the stigma. So that means that families who do not feel comfortable in disclosing their financial difficulties or the situation that they are in, will make it easier for them to access help and not feel like they have the stigma put upon them. Thank you.
Honourable members, we come to vote on this item. Item 3 as laid out on our order paper. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no.
No.
The ayes.
Divide.
There's a division called.
Australian in the House of Keys, 18 votes for, 3 against.
Legislative Council, 6 for, none against. Therefore, motion carried. So that, honourable members, concludes our sitting of Junior Tynwald. Can I congratulate you all for this morning? Those who have contributed, I'd say you've been very well considered with your views, well scripted. You've been relevant, you've been topical, you've been articulate, you've been challenging and penetrating, and I congratulate you for that. Those who didn't participate, I want to thank you too, because you have also been part of the political process, because you have voted, and because you have voted, you've actually been part of the decision making, which is what politicians do.
After the debate, I caught up with President of Tynwald, Lawrence Skelly.
I think the origins of Junior Tynwald were really about trying to engage young people with politics. And I believe it started in 1997. And none other than our good friend, good colleague, Ewan Watterson was actually a member of that Junior Tynwald and clearly was inspired to have a career in politics. So it was about, I think, engagement with young people and at the right age too, where they're sort of really mature enough to have a debate and listen to both sides of an argument and come to a decision. And it's just about engagement with young people in politics, essentially. So 1997 was where it started. I think it gained more momentum probably in 2006 when, of course, the Isle of Man, was a pioneer once more with regards to giving young people a vote at the age of 16. And at the time, I believe that was about 2,000 young people would have that opportunity to vote. And that was probably the easy part in making a law. Now, how do you engage with them? And the continuation of that, I think, has been a positive impact for young people, and an opportunity and a forum for them to talk about current affairs.
And obviously you can't answer this question, but Junior Tynwald often gives Senior Tynwald a run for their money. Certainly the quality of the debate, the range of questions that come out, first of all, it's really very good, and secondly, it's interesting because they're coming from an angle that many of the older Tynwald members maybe wouldn't get.
No, you're absolutely right, and I've now had the pleasure and the honour of presiding over two Junior Tynwalds, and in fairness, I really didn't quite appreciate the standard, shall we say, and the intellect and the relevance of these debates, and this time I did actually comment to the young people there that their level of engagement and their penetration, because we actually had not just members, but we had ministers, seasoned ministers, really challenged, and quite frankly, some of them were put on the back foot because of the quality of the questioning and the debate that went about. So yes, that was really, it was quite an eye-opener and really encouraging, I think, that to see and hear young people be so engaged and passionate. They were very passionate.
Certainly there was one or two very tenacious questioners that I've listened to during the editing of this the programme, and I thought, thank goodness I'm not the minister answering this question. And having been a minister in Junior Tynwald, I know that the level of questioning is quite high. What do you think the Tynwald members, not the Tynwald members, the Junior Tynwald members actually get out of this? How do you think it might influence them as they leave Junior Tynwald?
It's interesting, really, because you witness them and have a brief chat with them going in, and then you have a bigger engagement after the event. We have a sit down and a bite to eat and a cup of tea. And the great thing there is the afterwards, because they go in very nervous, apprehensive, because it is daunting. And actually it is for new Tynwald members. You remember that? Going in there and in that court, and knowing that everything is recorded, and you're very cautious and apprehensive. But what I did see there is that certain young people gained confidence. So they asked that first question, they came back and asked other questions, and it went through quite an interesting process. So it was the afterwards, really, where you really see the benefit, and they openly talk about that, which I thought was really encouraging. And once more, this is about trying to find an engagement with young people. They have a right to vote at 16, and that law is there, courtesy of past Tynwald, which is wonderful, really. So a few of them may take advantage of that, but you hope if they do have an interest, they will have then hopefully a lifetime interest in politics and exercise that democratic right to vote, which is important to recognise.
Because all too often we do hear particularly as elections are coming along, I'm not going to bother voting because it's a waste of time, because it's always the government that gets in, there's never been a more important time to encourage people to understand just how important their vote actually is.
It is correct, and one of the motions actually was about free school meals, and this wasn't about actually just throwing money away, but it was actually connected to the cost of living crisis. And to me, young people who wouldn't necessarily be thinking about that, they're not the ones in charge of the household budget, so to speak, but they actually recognise that giving a free school meal to more young people, and particularly primary school, the importance of a meal, but also the cost element to it, which was really important. But through that debate, it was relevant to understand, and some of them did, that okay, there is a cost element here, but where are you going to not spend money? So easy to spend money, but where do you save money? So, and that gets into budgeting issues. So I thought they were very topical, they were very relevant, and it was really encouraging to hear those debates both sides, and so I was very, very impressed there. And the young person who won, Eris Reader, who won the best contributor, moved both motions, but they weren't her motions. Both of them were. One of them wasn't her motion. Somebody dropped out late, and she picked it up. And that for me, and also the speaker as well, it sort of recognised that to pick up something that's not yours, you're not passionate about, but to actually deliver it confidently and knowledgibly about the subject matter, which was really impressive. Which is why we make a special award for the best contributor.
So obviously, Junior Tynwald. Quick or hot on the heels of Junior Tynwald was Senior Tynwald, at which the usual July Tynwald shenanigans took place. And now, of course, I find you on the deck chair with your Bermuda shorts on and sunglasses, enjoying the rain.
Yes, indeed we are. That's summer recess, yes. And but Junior Tynwald seems to always fall at that particular time. And I actually want to just pay tribute to the teachers who there's several teachers who have been very strong supporters of Junior Tynwald, because they're the ones that actually generate that interest and inspire the young people about politics, about, hey, you actually can make a difference and you might want to think about this as a career. And there were several of them who are looking at degrees in politics, which was great, but in a pretty wide context too. So I do want to pay tribute to the teachers there, and obviously their parents too, because you hope that they would actually say, hey, you can make a difference. This is the Isle of Man. It's a small community. We're a small parliament, and everyone can make that difference if they really wish to. So if that fires, that passion comes back to June, I guess, in 1997, he obviously was driven, and look at him now as the Speaker of the House of Keys.
And the little jibe there about Tynwald having a 3-month holiday, it's not the case, is it?
It isn't. Of course it isn't. But, government continues, right the way through. Parliament doesn't sit, but written questions still occur, and I'm seeing those there coming in, and then also committee work continues. But also this is a big opportunity for the members to actually get out and about. There's a lot of social events, there's civic events, and connect with the public once more. And you don't have that more so than actually in the great Manx summer that we would always have. So, but it is traditional in most parliaments to have this break, and it's a time to reset and to refresh, and and have some free time for thinking as well as reconnecting with the people.
Because again, I think people maybe misunderstand. When you are in Tynwald, you are so focused on all the discussions and debates that are taking place around you. It's quite easy sometimes to lose track of the fact that there is a wider Manx public out there with perhaps different views.
100%, and there is so many, and there always is, of course, and that opportunity needs to be taken. And I did sort of express that at the end of the Tynwald, get out and about, and and speak to the people. Well, as you go to all these different events that we have and enjoy throughout the summer here. So yes, it is an important time, I think, to do that reconnect and also refresh, because we do have that. Because when you're in session, it is week after week after week. You've got sittings, you've got Tynwalds, you've got motions, you've got there's so much going on that you really don't have that free time to literally think things very, very clearly, because you are making decisions, and decisions are sometimes very rapid and time constraints, and you've got to consume so much. And I think it's the one thing. It's very hard, and I always say this in induction, is reading time. Phil, of course, what that's like is if you've got to have the time to read, that's one thing, but you also need the time to digest it as well at the same time, to understand exactly what it is that you're possibly making a decision.
That was President of Tynwald, Lawrence Skelly. It's great to hear the Junior Tynwald members debating issues that matter to them and learning how our political system works. Will they go on to take up some of the highest offices in the land? Does Junior Tynwald help switch young people on to Manx politics? I suppose only time will tell. Let me know your thoughts on the programme by contacting Phil Gorn at manxradio.com and get in touch if you have any ideas for future shows. Don't forget this programme is available as a podcast on Manx Radio's website. For now though, I'm Phil Gorn, Gora Maios and Geisha from. Thanks for listening.